The more things change, the less they change. I'm going to try to go through this here and try to show you how there's a direct correlation to what's happening now, and it's occurred back in 1933. 33 meaning the Swiss Templars. Okay? Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January of 1933 by legal, constitutional, and democratic means. The Nazi Party was supported by farmers, small businessmen, civil servants, and young people. In the elections of 1930 and 32, the voters made the Nazi Party the largest party in the country, although not the majority. A few conservatives, nationalist politicians believed that Germany needed a stronger, more stable political system than the one offered by the Weimar Republic. They convinced President Otto von Hindenburg to invite Hitler to form a government. Once Hitler was in office, they expected to be able to control Hitler and use him for their own purposes. They were mistaken. Hitler claimed that Germany was on the verge of a communist revolution, and he persuaded Hindenburg and the Reichstag to consent to a series of emergency laws. Okay? What's happening now in the news, right? Declaration of emergency laws. What's happening with the wall and Trump, right? The more things change, the less they change. The consent to a series of emergency laws which the Nazis used to establish themselves firmly in power. These laws outlawed freedom of the press. Wonder how that happened. Aren't we going through that right now? Freedom of the press, your First Amendment rights, and public meetings, and approved the use of violence against Hitler's political enemies, particularly the socialists and the communists. Within 2 months after Hitler came to office, Germany was a police state, and Hitler was a legal dictator who could issue his own laws without having to gain the consent of either the Reichstag or the president. After carrying out this legal revolution, incapacitating representatives, institutions, and ending civil liberties, the Nazis worked to consolidate their position and their power. They abolished all other political parties, established single-party rule, dissolved trade unions, and put their own people in state governments and the bureaucracy. Many observers at the time considered the new Nazi state to be a monolithic structure, ruled and coordinated from the center. This was not, however, an accurate observation. Hitler actually issued few directives. Policy was set by an often chaotic jockeying for power among rival Nazi factions. Moreover, Hitler was careful not to alienate the non-Nazi conservatives and nationalists, politicians, the landowners, industrialists, and military men who supported the Nazi regime and continued to hold position of power in it until 1936 to 37. His political alliance with these right-wingers helped give the Third Reich, right now we're in the Fourth Reich, an element of continuity with the past and makes it seem less alarming and more normal to both the German people and to the foreigners. Hitler ruled by eliminating his enemies. This might be a quite literal elimination of opposition leaders, especially communists, who were dragged from their beds in the middle of the night and imprisoned. Or it might mean preventing public discussion and closed public forums by both physical intimidation and decree. Hitler also purged the ranks of his friends and supporters. If he feared they were becoming a challenge to his power, the key to Hitler's success was his ability to marshal the use of violence to achieve his ends. For this purpose, paramilitary forces were the right arm of the Nazi Party. Stormtroopers. The first of the paramilitary groups was the SA, or the Stormtroopers. Who are the Stormtroopers? Those are the ones that went from house to house, right? Under Ernest Röhm, who helped Hitler achieve electoral victories by beating up political opponents on the streets and using their thug-like tactics. The group was organized in 1921 as a gymnast and a supports division of the Nazi Party, and its members consisted of a large number of army veterans, adopting a military appearance for their terrorist operations. See? The more things change, the less they change. See, we have terrorism, right? What is the Bush cabal indoctrinating after 9/11? Terrorism, right? SA members were also known as brown shirts. By the beginning of 1934, there were 2.5 million members, vastly outnumbered the regular army of 100,000 soldiers. Heinrich Himmler, 1900-1945, headed an elite force of the Nazi Party with the SA called the SS, a group whose members wore black uniforms. Doesn't everybody wear black nowadays? And menacing skull and bones insignia. Well, you know who the Skull and Bones is? That's your secret societies. Those are your Masons. Those are your 33s that are tied to who? Lucifer. Yeah. Skull and crossbone insignia on their caps. Himmler seized control of political policing and now stood as Romm's chief rival. The SS became indispensable to the success of the Nazi Party. As Hitler explained it, terror is the most effective political instrument. Where have we heard that before? 9/11? Shock and awe? Yeah, in the name of security, we need to do this, right? In 1934, with the assistance of the army, Hitler and the SS purged the SA and executed Romm. The leaders of the army feared Romm's demands that the SA became the core of new enlarged army of the Third Reich. Hitler saw Romm's demands for a second revolution and a more radical Nazi regime as a threat to his leadership of the Nazi movement. The SS rid itself of rival organizations and became Hitler's exclusive elite corps, responsible for carrying out his extreme programs. And responsible later for the greatest atrocities of the Second World War. Nazi goals. Hitler identified 3 organizing goals for the Nazi state: Lebensraum, or a living space, rearmament, and economic recovery. These goals were basis of a new foreign policy Hitler forged for Germany, and they served to fuse that foreign policy with the domestic politics of the Third Reich. Key to Hitler's worldwide was the concept of Lebensraum, which he considered the right and the duty of the German master race. What have I been telling you? It's all about genetics. The term Lebensraum embodied the concept that the Third Reich would be the world's greatest empire, one that would endure for 1,000 years. Hitler first started his ideas about living space in Mein Kampf, that's his book, where he argued that superior nations had the right to expand into the territories of inferior states. Where have we heard that before? The invasion of the caravan? Living space meant for him German domination of Central and Eastern Europe at the expense of Slavic people. The Aryan master race would dominate inferior people. Aryan master race, who's that? That's the Egyptian bloodline. In order for the German population to expand, Germany needed more land. Colonies were unacceptable because they were weakened rather than strengthened. Germany must expand within continental Europe. Hitler's primary target was what he called Russia and her vassal bordered states, but his aspirations stretched beyond the European continent into German domination of the entire world. He considered the United States to be a racially mongrel state that could be defeated by a strong and racially pure German at some future and unspecified time. His idea of world mastery also held out the promise of a future Aryan utopia. Hitler also committed the Nazi state to the rearmament of Germany. He withdrew Germany from the world arena to prepare the German nation for war. By postponing his rearmament plans for the first year of the rule, and then by using devious bookkeeping practices to bury his budgetary expenditures, he managed to obscure from the world his massive commitment to rearmament. In 1933, the German state was illicitly spending more than $1 billion. Okay, by 1939, annual expenditures to prepare Germany for war had climbed to $30 billion. Hitler knew that preparation for war meant more than amassing weapons. One of Germany's greatest weaknesses in World War I had been its dependence on imports of raw materials and foodstuffs. So logistics. Dependence on other nations for raw materials had crippled the German war effort by 1918. To avoid this problem again, Hitler instituted a program of economic self-sufficiency. Where have we heard this before? Sustainability, self-sufficiency, right? Where have we heard this shit before? Huh? All right. By which Germany aimed to produce everything that it consumed. He encouraged the efforts of German industry to develop synthetics, including petroleum, rubber, metals, and fats. Okay, autarky, as a rearmament measure, contributed to Hitler's third goal for the Nazi state: economic recovery from the Great Depression. The state pumped money into a private economy, creating new jobs and achieving full employment after 1936, an accomplishment unmatched by any other Western nation. Recovery was built on armaments as well as consumer products. The Nazi state concentration of economic power in the hands of few strengthened big businesses. The victims of corporate consolidation were the small firms that could no longer compete with government-sponsored corporations like chemical firms of IG Farben. Does that sound familiar? Right here. Some of the non-Nazi conservatives and nationalist leaders who supported the Nazi regime thought that the emphasis of rearmament was potentially dangerous. Economics feared that it would cause serious inflation. Even some generals thought that Hitler was rearming Germany in too rapid and disorderly manner. Hitler prevailed in 1936-37 when he introduced his four-year plan, dedicated to the goals of full-scale rearmament and economic self-sufficiency. Before the third year of the four-year plan, however, Hitler was aware of the failure to develop synthetic products sufficient to meet Germans' needs. In order to preserve his commitment to military and economic recovery, he found another path to self-sufficiency. If Germany could not create substitutes, it would control the territories that provided fuel, metals, and foodstuffs. Germany had been importing raw materials from southern Europe and wielding increasing economic influence over the Balkan countries. Hitler now realized that economic self-sufficiency could be directly linked to the main goal of the Nazi state: